Good morning and welcome back to Audiophile. I'm Erin Schultz and I have some people to introduce you to, or I guess I don't have to introduce Rick. This is Rick Schultz, of course. And this is our son, Rick, and he's going to be joining us today with this introductory conversation about listening. We're going to just have a basic forum today about what it means to actually listen in high-end audio, and with the hopes that we can develop this further and add some more videos after to kind of excavate the whole process of listening and to uncover some things that you might not have thought of before with listening. So first off, listening, it might seem self-explanatory, but I think we've been talking about how it really depends on what it is you're listening to. For partners out there, living with somebody or trying to communicate with somebody, you hear the cliche, we have to listen for understanding, not just for a response, right? So how you listen will be in response to how we're communicating. The other things we've talked about were, listening for content, to try and glean information from something being said or something that we heard. You're listening to pinpoint ideas. That's another way of listening. Also listening to anomalies or things that are different or irregularities, things like that, I guess is important when you're listening to a heartbeat if you're a doctor. That might be what you're listening to, is an irregularity or something. So that brings us to what is the end goal when we're listening in high-end audio, for high-end audio and audio playback. So that's where Brechen comes in today. Brechen is an audio engineer, recording engineer, is the right term, I think. He's also worked with us in high-end audio and at high fidelity cables, and he's obviously been with us as he grew up, so he's kind of been immersed in this whole development of the company and development of products with Rick, and so he has kind of a different insight, and some of the things that he's experienced and has shared with us, we've gleaned a new understanding, so we thought we'd bring him in today and just talk about it. So what are we actually after when we talk about listening in high-end audio?
Well, so I'm going to start off with that one. That's changed for me dramatically since Brechen, got in to recording. Because what I listened for before was a platform that was created by fellow audiophiles in what they thought I should be listening for. And Brechen really brought a lot of perspective in on that, of what's the reality in comparison. So one of the things that in audio we look for is this very deep separated soundstage, and as we developed the new technology for high fidelity cables and magnetic conduction, things started to get a little bit more forward. They were still really separate, and there was great projection forward and backward of the speakers, and there was still a really great soundstage to it, but you'd get things fleshed out a lot more, and it seemed to bring them more forward. And so one of the things that Brechen had talked to me about was miking. So when you in the recording studio, would it be common to have a vocal that would sound 50 feet behind the speakers or 20 feet behind the speakers?
Well, that's also the thing too with recording and production. When you do actually get into the production side of it, that can all be changed. The distance of your mic creates that general sound that first goes into your interface and into your recording, basically. So that's what you get, but that can also be changed from panning it left to right, from distances, from reverbs and echoes. Everything can be changed in the post-production. So listening for little details like that, it's, how should I say, it depends on the type of recording you're actually listening to. You can't expect all these recordings to tell you the exact, listen the same way to every recording, because every recording is recorded differently, and by different people, mixed by different people, mastered by different people, so it can be created in so many different ways. So if you're focusing on where your vocalist is standing or where your instruments are, that might not actually be the recorded part of it. They might have changed that all in post-production. So, and where you mic it also can change. If you've got your certain types of mics, ribbon mics, condenser mics, everything like that, it depends on what mic you're using to get certain sounds as well. So
I think that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of times listening, because for audiophiles, their reference system is their own personal system. So there are a number of factors that go into that. There's the time and effort they put in. There's the the different gear that they have in. But there's also the atmosphere. People listen for the ambiance of something. So often playback, if you can't hear the words clearly because they're too muffled. I mean, are we listening to hear that? Are we listening for the clarity in that and the sounds, like the words? Also the instruments, where are the instruments placed? Can you imagine it, as you're sitting listening? All of those things come into play, right?
Yeah, and I guess even the way some of the recording is done, we always, in high-end audio, we have this visualization that it's a single set, a single track. Somebody comes in, and the band just starts to play as a whole, and we mic that, and that's what's going to be replayed all the time. That's not realistic either, is it?
Not very realistic at all. For instance, using guitars and such like that, they can redo it 32 times, multiple times. You can have the same guitarist doing different little snippets, 20 seconds here, just filling in gaps. Try to do that. So it's not like they just play live. There's recordings, obviously they're live recordings, but if you are looking at produced music and such like that, then you're pretty much just hearing whatever the producer wants you to hear. Yeah. And that's the big thing. Anything from small creaks in chairs to breaths or hums in the background, that's all whatever the producer wants you to hear. If it is a live recording, you'll get what you get, basically. But even small breaths, even like small hums can be brought up just so that you just hear that in that moment. And
right.
So if you hear that and you're like, oh, it's so good, blah, 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 it also could just be that.
Right. So that's another point right there. So for manufacturers, it's different then, right? Because what we're using, and that's kind of the basis of our business in the first place, is using the signal in response to how the end sound is produced, right? I mean, in a nutshell.
Yeah, we're trying to get it to be as realistic as possible, yet that recording has been manipulated somehow, some way. They're all going to be somewhat different. And I guess, as an audiophile, you hear that. You'll have some tracks that just have anemic bass and other ones that tend to boom, and how do you get it right? But they're all recorded different. They're all recorded on different microphones. I think one of the things that surprised me most is as we got through in our technology, I started to hear some like really upfront vocals, but the detail and the clarity was just so fantastic. And watching you do some of the recordings that you've done, I realized the microphone is typically placed within a couple of inches of the person's mouth. You're telling me about the spit
guards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on the sound you're trying to get. There's multiple different ways you can mic guitars, you can mic anything, and it's really what sound you're going for and whatever let's say the producer wants or the artist wants it. That's basically how it is. And pretty much with any recording or anything like that, like you can't make it good is the thing, like garbage in, garbage out. What you're going to hear in your high-end audio systems is pretty much whatever was actually picked up by those microphones. And then after that, it can be altered in certain ways, but you can only have as much as what actually goes into that microphone and what's kept there.
Yeah, that's come up lots too. Once when your system is at the caliber of reproducing playback like at such a high level, you can easily identify good recordings. And that's important. And sometimes, I mean, you'll have the gold standard recordings in high-end audio, and although you get sick of hearing the same thing no matter what room you go to when at an audio show, there are many of us that end up playing different things for different reasons, right? Some of it is because the playback has just been recorded incredibly, and it may not be one of those gold standard recordings, but it's incredible. And the other is for, I guess, the emotion that it invokes, and you can actually hear the words and make out what they're saying, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. It really does depend on with the manufacturer. We're many of us, not all, but a lot of the manufacturers in this are audiophiles. That's been my motivating factor from day one. Is I was an audiophile first, long before I was ever into manufacturing, and that drove what I was doing in manufacturing differently than, let's say, somebody that had a master's in business and decided that audio was a good arena to make money in, which probably is smarter than doing what I did by a long shot. But when it comes to audio reproduction playback, it's a really big area. So we're gonna have to cover this in a number of videos. I'd like to bring this back again and get into some of those areas that you talked about when we first opened up, and basically just go into a little bit more detail of this, try to get our customers involved and see what questions they might have. I know for me things changed a lot, like I said, and having some insight from a recording engineer really does make a difference, and I think that'll invoke a lot of questions from our viewers as well.
So we invite you to join us on this excavation and welcome you back to view some of our new videos as we go down this road.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Thanks. See you then.